Once upon a time, there was a little boy called Nicky Tough Guy, and he lived in a big house by the sea. Now,
My name is Olivia. I'm not a little boy, and I don't live in a big house by the sea. I live in London, in Stratton, which is about as far from the sea as it's possible to get. I mean, not literally, of course. That would be here. The Eurasian Point of Inaccessibility, located in a desert 2,645 kilometers away from the nearest coast, somewhere between China and Kazakhstan. I guess what I mean is that this feels a million miles away from the glistening metropolis that is Streatham Hill. But even though the sea isn't really that far away geographically speaking, it's actually pretty bloody difficult to get to from here without spending hours in a car pumping out exhaust fumes just trying to get out of the city. This wasn't always the case, though. During the 1950s and 60s, the heyday of the Great British Seaside Holiday, newly established paid annual leave saw working families flock to the coast courtesy of the vast British rail network. That is, of course, until the Beeching Railway cuts of the 1960s, which saw the closure of 55% of Britain's railway stations and 30% of its route miles. Seaside towns in particular were disproportionately affected by Beeching's cuts. Devon, for example, saw its rail network go from this to this. I think it's bizarre that in a country that's just spent more than £50 billion shaving 30 minutes off train journeys between London and Birmingham, we've somehow still gotten to a point where flying to Marbella or Magaluf can be cheaper and easier than accessing some of Britain's traditional seaside resorts. And to try and prove my point, I thought it would be fun to walk in the footsteps of Devon's disused railway lines. But then, when it came down to it, I realised that that would probably actually take quite a long time, and maybe it would be better to drive. Yeah. The problem is, though, I can't. So I recruited this here ex-Devon boy and former inhabitant of the big house by the sea to be my chauffeur.
you still film?
I am still filming.
Come. Stop.
My dad, Nick.
Wait, no. Can you clap as well? Cool. Yes, that's definitely going. Right, so, Papa, can you tell me, who is Nicky Tough Guy?
Nicky Tough Guy. Nicky Tough Guy was invented in about 1965-6 by my next door neighbour, Derek Pribble, who used to call me Nicky Tough Guy for some reason. I don't know why. And I don't know how it started. It seems to me that nobody else remembers it. My mother didn't really particularly remember it. My sisters don't particularly remember it, but Derek Pribble certainly didn't remember it when I asked her about it. But I did.
You did.
Well, I always wanted to tell you bedtime stories because I don't remember being told bedtime stories by my parents. But I always thought it was an important thing. Yeah, and I suppose that I sort of took it out of retirement and made him into a character because I thought it would be an interesting kind of fictional character to write about, to tell stories about. You know, I could have made up anybody really, but I just took it off the shelf and used that one.
So we're off.
We are off. Look at those trees. Unbelievable. Spring has sprung.
Are you excited?
I'm very excited.
First up on our journey through Britain's railway past are the beautiful beaches of North Devon. Back in the railway glory days of the 1960s, the Atlantic Coast Express departed Waterloo every summer's day at 11 a.m, splitting its carriages at Exeter before pumping happy holidaymakers to Ilfracombe, Bude, Padstow and Plymouth, and all the hundreds of tiny little branch lines and stops that spread like arteries through the Devonshire countryside. Even with all of these stops, you could have been in Braunton, where we're heading now, in 5 hours. Not anymore. The last train departed Braunton Station in October 1970, the same year my dad and his family said goodbye to Hertfordshire and moved down to Devon. We've been driving nearly an hour at this point, and we still haven't quite made it out of London. We used to do this drive as a family every summer, up until I was about 6 or 7. My sister and I would squabble in the back seat of the car as we watched the traffic turn into skyscrapers. The skyscrapers turn into trees and fields. The trees and fields turn into sun and sea and sand. Until finally we made it down here, down to Braunton for our very own Great British Seaside holiday.
Oh, hell yeah.
Which was a funny choice really, considering my dad always insisted that Devon is a dump.
Wow. So where are we?
So this, my little maggot, is the cottage we used to come to when you were a very small child. Well, it must have been 1.5, 2 perhaps, which meant that you were about 3, 4, maybe 4. And this is it, Shipham Cottage. Shipham Cottage. And we used to come here and we used to go down to the big sandy hill and all the burrows over there down by the beach. We used to walk along the beach, which is a very, very long beach, Saunton Sands.
We'd walk for miles up and down the beach and over the big sandy hills. Our tiny, tired legs powered on by the stories that my dad told us as we went.
I mean, I think for me, when I think of Nicky Tough stories, the ones that, well, I guess not the stories themselves necessarily, but what kind of comes into focus for me is always family holidays, because I think that's when we would have you locked out for the week and be like, right.
Yes.
Every
Yes,
night.
I remember actually I was thinking when we went to see that little cottage that we used to stay at in Devon, I remember there was an awful lot of Nicky Tough going on, because as you said, we were together all day long, and then every evening, we spent with you. So Nicky Tough stories were demanded and delivered.
Stories about the troll that lived under the rickety slats of the boardwalk. About the epic battles that left behind the blank bullet casings we'd hunt for on the nearby military training range. And about the fairies that lived at the bottom of the garden of the little cottage that we'd return to each night.
So it was drawn partly on other people's stories, so plagiarised, I suppose you'd call it, and drawn partly on my own memories and so forth, and the things I'd seen. I used to populate the stories with things which I thought you'd be interested in, and embellish the kind of drama, because when it got exciting, you'd all kind of snuggle up and kind of, ride a bit and, snuggle down under the bedclothes a bit more. So I suppose I monitored in real time what used to push your buttons in terms of excitement and so forth, and then put a bit more of that in and a little bit less of the boring adult stuff.
I mean, I can sort of remember wisps out of a lot of them, but they've kind of, I guess in a way all blend into one, but also at the same time, like, you used to tell us quite a lot of tall tales in general that weren't necessarily Nicky Tough Guy stories, but used to obviously insist that all of the Nicky Tough Guy stories were 100% entirely true.
Yeah.
But there were quite a lot of things that used to suggest were 100% entirely true, such as you have to hold on to the handles on the roof of the car, otherwise it would blow off on the motorway, or that the moon was made of cheese, or
Everything's black and white in the office.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I'm a liar.
No, but what I mean is that you're not a liar so much, just a teller of
Teller of tall tales.
Yeah.
From here, we're following tall tales, memories, and old railways as they take us away from the sea, inland towards Dartmoor, and towards my dad's own childhood memories.
Where are we?
We are in Yelverton in Devon, which is a little tiny village just on the edge of Dartmoor. And in 1970, the Bryant family, much to my mother's horror and shock and surprise, upped sticks from Hertfordshire and moved here. So I seem to remember this was the beginning of the fighty period in the Bryant household. It had been going on before, but I'd been too young to notice, but I certainly noticed it while I was here. Things were thrown and words were exchanged.
From Yelverton, we're following the old Princeton branch line up onto the moor itself, past tors and lakes and quarries, and towards the spectacular isolation of Dartmoor Prison.
We're going to Burrator Lake. So my father and I used to fish here occasionally. We didn't use it all that much, but it was our local lake, so we used to come here from time to time. I don't actually ever remember catching any fish in this lake, but I used not to catch that many fish in those days because I was only 9 and I wasn't very good at it. So I do remember these posts, these granite posts by the side of the road. I think the lake comes into view in a minute, but it's damn cool. Legend has it that when they flooded this valley there was a church at the bottom of it. And the story was that when the wind was blowing and there were waves and the water was disturbed, it used to be able, if you listened carefully, you could hear the bell of the old church clanging. I suspect it was apocryphal.
What does that mean?
That it didn't really happen. It was just the story that people, of course it didn't happen. I mean that's just not possible, but it was a good story nonetheless.
Why do you think people tell apocryphal stories?
I don't know.
Do you know?
Folklore.
Yeah. What do you think folklore's all about? Why do you think people do it?
Because there wasn't any telly in those days. All mobile phones. They had to do something in their spare time. So they made up stories.
Well, it's funny that you say that about tellies, because who else didn't have any tellies when they were growing up?
Well, you didn't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you think that maybe that's why we liked your stories so much?
Yeah, I didn't want any competition. I thought that if you were to watch TV, then you wouldn't want to listen to Nicky Tough Guy stories anymore. It was my own selfish, mean, spiteful, narcissism that stopped you having telly.
I've never been here before, but still, the moors feel familiar. Impressed in my memory is the landscape where a young adventurer called Nicky Tough Guy once clambered up the tors, built shelters amongst the gorse, and chased escaped prisoners down across the moor. Maybe the absence of telly really did grant me a somewhat overactive imagination. What did you think of the moors?
Well, I like them, to my surprise. Whenever people ask me about Dartmoor, given I lived on Yelverton is actually on Dartmoor, I would have said I didn't particularly like them. So I did, I liked them very much this time. The funny thing is, as we get a bit older, well, I don't know, I shouldn't really generalise. As I get a bit older, I'm less resistant to nostalgia. I'm still not really very keen on it, but I don't mind revisiting my past. With the passage of time, as with a lot of things, it doesn't actually feel as if it was me that did them. It makes it, I always imagine that they're kind of like a film that I've seen, that I remember, but I wasn't the protagonist. There were other people doing that. It doesn't feel personal to me anymore.
From here, we're following the trains back towards the sea, towards a place that I too am nostalgic for. Somewhere I can picture vividly, even though I've never been.
So,
this is the big house by the sea.
This is a big house by the sea.
Can you see the sea from here anyway?
You can. You'll see it in a minute. Yeah.
Sit.
Isn't that funny having those things up there, rotting away? Okay, so this is Breakridge House, famous from the Nicky Tough Guy stories.
And how come it was this house that was in the Nicky Tough Guy story?
Because this is where Nicky Tough Guy used to live.
Fair enough.
Almost all fiction draws upon real life and real life experience, including great works like Dickens, Thackeray, Austen, and me.
And you.
Draws upon it, but in this case, apparently doesn't mirror it exactly.
Because I guess you weren't really a little boy when you lived here, were you? You were what?
No, I was here, when we got here I was, 13, so it must have been 73. I was 13 when we moved here, so my sort of teens were here. You know, my first car and my first motorbike and my first girlfriend and all that sort of stuff when I was living in this house, yeah. And of course, you know, the family lived here together, the last time they were together. All of us, all 5 of us together. So I have quite fond memories of it, I suppose. Truth being, though, that by the time I was about 16 or 17, all I could think of was getting out. Getting out of the house, getting out of Devon.
Where did you want to go?
London.
London,
New York, Paris, anywhere.
London, New York,
Just
Paris.
not Churston.
Just not Churston.
Okay, so this isn't quite the old tumble-down house I had in mind. The house of my dad's childhood, the one that felt so prominent in my own, has been gutted, repurposed, and reimagined. Just like the shiny heritage steam train that carries tourists over the viaduct as they follow in the footsteps of the old Dart Valley Railway. Or the brave, carefree little boy who replaced the lanky teenager desperate to escape. Memory's funny that way, in the way it can be rewritten, in how it shifts over time. They say that when you remember something, you're actually recalling the last time you remembered it, your last journey into the past, rather than the past itself.
I gotta say, I'm surprised by how beautiful it is right now. When you're a kid, you just don't notice these things, you know what I mean? You really don't. And this was just what I used to do every day in those days. Don't take much notice. So I want to live here, don't get me wrong. It would drive me completely nuts. This is it, by the petrol station.
It's what, sorry?
This is the turning by the petrol station.
Continue straight onto North Embankment, B3205.
Pretty, huh?
Very pretty.
Okay, so this is Dartmouth. This is where I used to hang out when I was a boy, and over there is Kingswear.
That building over there with the glass roof is Kingswear Terminus, the end of the railway line. Dartmouth railway station was open until 1972, but no trains have ever stopped here. When they were building the railway here in the 1800s, the South Devon Railway Company ran out of money before they could build a line that crossed this point where the river meets the sea. Instead, passengers bought their tickets at Dartmouth Station before crossing a walkway to a landing stage that floats up and down with the tides. There, they could wait for a steam ferry to take them across the Dart before boarding the train at Kingswear.
But Dartmouth, so when we lived in Churston Ferris, it's up on the hill above Kingswear, which is the town on the other side of the River Dart from Dartmouth. And I always really liked Dartmouth. And then in this marina over here, you'll see all the boats moored up over there, the sailing boats. That's where my father used to have his boat, called Ten, which he used to race with some success around here. The sad thing about that is that I never particularly enjoyed sailing with my father. He was a bit of a shouter, my father. He was very, in a lot of ways he was a very nice man, but he was a bit of a shouter, and had quite a quick temper. And it wasn't always the biggest fun spending lots and lots of time with him. And he was, like a lot of people, that got slightly worse on a boat. So I didn't particularly enjoy sailing with him in the dinghy. And though I didn't like sailing with him very much, he absolutely loved it. It meant a huge amount to him, and he was quite good at it and had quite a lot of success. Yeah, and then fairly recently, 6-7 years ago, my father had always said that he wanted ashes scattered on the mouth of the Dart, where his races used to begin and end. So we all went down there, my two sisters and I, and his widow, Val, and we hired a little boat and we putted out on a beautiful, beautiful day in May, I think, out into the mouth of the river and dropped his ashes into the water, which I'm sure he'd have been very pleased about.
And then, of course, you did your yacht deliveries as well, didn't you?
Oh yes, yes. I did my first yacht delivery was out of Dartmouth. I went to all sorts of places. It was a great adventure. It was my first year at university, and it was terrific. And then the following year, when I graduated, I sailed another boat with a different delivery skipper from Plymouth to the States, to Annapolis in the States.
And then that's what you want to do when you retire as well, isn't it? So
Yeah. The bit that I remember most is when you set off. I mean, when we set off across the Atlantic, basically you're at sea for days and days and days on end. And you get this incredible, once you lose sight of land, all you've got is just the sea and the sky. And you get this sensory deprivation and this confinement that you're not used to. And after about 2 or 3 days, it's really beginning to get a bit oppressive. Plus, there's nothing to see apart from the sea and the sky, and there's nothing to hear apart from the sea and the sky. And then suddenly you get this sort of zen-like state. You wake up one morning and you just think, this is all I need. It's wonderful. I could just sit and look at the sea for hours. You get really into the sailing bit. You do your watches day and night. You watch the dawn come up. You watch the sun go down. You see these wonderful starry nights. You're very conscious of the weather and your environment. You feel and experience everything in a much more blissful kind of way than you do when you're living in London and surrounded by noise. But I'd quite like to try and recreate that. It remains to be seen whether I can. I haven't been offshore, outside of land since then, so I might just find it lonely and dull.
Because you love the sea, don't you?
I love the sea, I really do. I'm happiest with water and mountains. I can sit and look at the sea all day long. I know you love it too.
Yeah, I guess the last bit is sort of, obviously you moved around a lot when you were a kid.
Yes.
Sort of both within Devon and outside of Devon.
Yes.
And I suppose I did as well. Yeah, I mean, I suppose you moved around a lot more, but when you were a kid, where did you feel like you were from when you were a kid, and then how do you think that changed when you got older, and where would you say that you're from now?
We did move a lot. It was because my father wanted to live in Devon and my mother really didn't. And they felt they fought a lot. It wasn't the most successful marriage. In the later, apparently it was quite successful in the early days, but I don't remember that bit. I only remember the bad bits. I mean, from 70 onwards when we moved to Devon, it was mostly pretty bad. That's not the question. The question is, where do I? Well, I identified strongly with Hertfordshire. Those are my idyllic childhood days. It was an age of innocence, and the skies were always blue, and the holidays went on forever, and I absolutely loved it. And that, in a way, marked the end of that particular era of my life. And then we moved to Yelverton. Yelverton was all right. I didn't particularly like it. My experiences there weren't all great. We were only there for 18 months, I think. So I never really felt as if I came from Yelverton. You'll be relieved to hear having been to Yelverton. Then Bath, we moved to Bath. I loved being in Bath, but I never really felt as if I came from Bath because I hadn't been there long enough. And then we moved to Churston in 1973, let's say. And we were there I was there for 5 or 6 years, I suppose. So it's the longest I've lived anywhere apart from Hertfordshire. So I did identify with that part of the world, very formative years, sort of after I left school, so 15, 16, 17, up to I went to university. So I felt I was from there. But where am I from? I'm from where I was when I started choosing where I lived. And as soon as I left university, I moved to London. London is where I live. London's where I belong, and London's where I come from now.
I'm 26 now, about the same age my dad was when he chose London as his home. I'm still not sure where I'm from, which of the places I've lived I feel the most connected to, or if any of these roots are strong enough to keep me in place. I actually seem to be spending most of my time on trains, going up and down this country I didn't move to until my mid-teens, and yet was always told is my home. Real trains, that is, not the ghosts of trains past. But when I think back to my earliest memories of England, of the stories that linked me to who I am and where I come from, I think of a little boy called Nicky Toughguy who lived in a big house by the sea.